The winter morning in the small North Korean village was silent, except for the sound of the wind pressing against the thin wooden walls of Jinho's home. The house was no more than a shack, its roof sagging, its windows patched with rags, and its floor cold enough to sting bare feet. Inside, 12-year-old Jinho sat on the floor beside his younger sister Haejin, who was bundled in a torn quilt. Her lips were pale. Her eyes barely opened when he whispered her name. "Yoni, are you hungry?" Jinho asked softly, though he already knew the answer. Haejin gave a weak nod, her small hand clutching his sleeve. She was 9, but her frame was so thin, she looked no older than 6. Every rib showed, and the sound of her breathing was shallow, fragile, like it could stop at any moment. Their mother sat nearby, trying to light a small stove with scraps of wood. Her hands shook with exhaustion, and the flames refused to catch. There was no rice, no corn, no beans, only a pot of boiling water that she hoped would trick their empty stomachs for another day. Jinho's stomach growled, a hollow ache that had become as normal as breathing. He pressed his hand against it, ashamed that he felt hunger when his sister's body was disappearing before his eyes. Outside, the sound of boots echoed faintly. Korean soldiers patrolled the streets, their rifles slung across their backs. Their presence was constant, watching, listening, waiting for anyone who dared to question the shortages. In this village, words were as dangerous as weapons. People disappeared for saying less than a whisper. Jinho remembered the old neighbor who had once complained about ration cuts. One morning, the Korean soldiers came and dragged him away. His wife screamed, but no one helped. Helping was dangerous. By nightfall, the man was gone, and his house stood empty like a warning. Since then, Jinho's mother had forbidden him to speak too loudly, even at home. "Walls have ears," she always said, "and ears here report to the Korean soldiers." But silence did not feed them. Jinho often roamed the edge of the marketplace, his eyes searching for scraps of discarded food. Sometimes he found a rotten radish, sometimes nothing at all. That morning, when he returned empty-handed, Haejin looked at him with hollow eyes. He couldn't meet her gaze. He felt he was failing her, failing his family, even though he was just a boy. In the corner of the shack, Haejin whispered, "Appa, I had a dream. In my dream, there was rice and sugar water." Her voice cracked on the word sugar. It wasn't food they ever had. Sugar was rare, almost mythical for people like them. Jinho's chest tightened at her words. He remembered once long ago, when their mother had managed to trade something small for a spoonful of sugar. She had dissolved it in water and given it to them like medicine. The sweetness had made Haejin smile, her face glowing as if she had forgotten hunger, even just for a moment. That memory haunted Jinho. He wanted to see that smile again. As night fell, Jinho lay awake, listening to Haejin's shallow breaths. He thought about the sugar, about how it might give her strength again. And for the first time, a dangerous idea formed in his mind. He would find sugar, somehow, no matter the cost. He knew the risk people were arrested, or even executed for trading illegally. But what was more dangerous? Facing Korean soldiers, or watching his sister fade away in front of him? The cold wind whistled through the cracks in the wall. Jinho tightened his fists under the blanket. Hunger had already taken away his father years ago. It would not take Haejin too. Not while he was alive. The boy closed his eyes, his body weak but his resolve burning. Tomorrow, he would begin his search. Tomorrow, he would step into the shadows, where life and death balanced on every choice. For now, he listened to the silence, the hunger, the sound of his sister breathing beside him, and he promised himself, "I will save her, even if it costs me everything." The morning air was sharp with frost when Jinho left the shack. His mother had warned him not to wander too far, but he could not tell her what he planned. She knew she would stop him, and if she tried to stop him, Haejin might not live to see spring. The streets of the village were nearly empty. A few women stood in line outside the ration station, clutching faded coupons that would buy them almost nothing. Korean soldiers lounged nearby, rifles glinting in the gray light, their cold eyes scanning the line. Everyone kept their heads down. Jinho moved quickly, his small figure blending into the shadows. His stomach growled, but his mind was sharper than his hunger. He had only one thought: sugar. At the edge of the marketplace, he slowed. The stalls were mostly empty, nothing but wilted greens or scraps of cornmeal left behind. But Jinho knew what he was looking for would not be displayed openly. Illegal traders moved like ghosts, whispering behind corners, selling what was forbidden. A boy his age could not simply walk up to them, so he listened. He stood near a broken wall, pretending to search the ground, while his ears caught the murmurs of grown men. Words like rice, tobacco, sugar. His heart skipped at the last one. He followed the sound carefully until he saw them. 2 men with worn coats, one with a scar across his cheek. They stood close, talking in hushed voices. A small pouch exchanged hands, and Jinho glimpsed something white inside, a glimmer of sugar crystals. His throat went dry. That was it. That was what he needed. But how he had nothing to trade. He searched his pockets and found only a smooth stone and a piece of thread. Worthless. He thought of his mother's last blanket, the old pot they used to boil water. If he could take one of those, maybe. But no. Without them, his family would freeze. Still, he couldn't walk away. He stepped closer, his small frame trembling with fear. Before he could speak, a heavy hand grabbed his collar and yanked him back. "Where are you sneaking, boy?" It was a Korean soldier's. His uniform was dirty, but his rifle was clean, and the anger in his eyes was sharper than the blade at his belt. Ginho's heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't speak. His tongue felt frozen. The Korean soldier shook him. "Answer me. Are you spying? Trying to steal from the People's Army?" I was just looking for food," Jinho stammered. Voice cracked like dry wood. The Korean soldier's grip tightened. For a moment, Jinho thought this was the end. He would be dragged away like the neighbor who had vanished. But then the scar-faced traitor stepped forward. "He's nothing, comrade," the man said, forcing a laugh. "Just a hungry brat. Let him go before his mother cries and causes trouble." The Korean soldier stared hard at Jinho, then spat on the ground and shoved him away. "Next time, you won't be lucky." Jinho stumbled, his knees scraping the frozen dirt. But he didn't run. He looked up at the traitor, who was already turning back to his business. "Please," Ginho whispered, his voice desperate. "I need sugar, my sister. She's dying." The traitor's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he crouched down so his face was level with Jinho's. His breath smelled of tobacco. "Sugar costs more than your life, boy. What do you have to trade?" Jinho swallowed hard. "Nothing, but I can work. I'll do anything. Just a little, please." The man studied him, then gave a small, cold smile. "Work, eh? Dangerous words in a dangerous place? Come back tomorrow night, near the river, alone. If you're late, or if anyone follows, you won't find me again." Before Jinho could answer, the man stood and walked away. That night, back in the shack, Jinho lay awake beside Hajin. Her breathing was weaker, her body burning with fever. He reached for her hand and whispered, "Hold on, Ani. Tomorrow I'll bring you sweetness. Promise." The promise burned inside him like fire. But so did the Korean soldier's warning. He had stepped into a world of shadows where one wrong move could cost not only his life, but his family's too. Still, as the wind howled outside, Jinho knew there was no turning back. For Haijin, he would face the Korean soldiers, the traitors, even death itself. The river was a black ribbon under the moonlight, frozen in parts, surface whispering with cracks that sounded like bones breaking in the cold. Jinho's feet crunched on the frost as he crept toward the meeting place. His heart beat so loud he thought the Korean soldiers patrolling the village would hear it. He had told his mother he was fetching water. She hadn't questioned it, though the buckets he carried were empty. Her eyes were too tired, her body too worn down to notice the trembling in his hands. The traitor was already there. The scar-faced man leaned against a tree, his figure blending with the shadows. His eyes glimmered like a wolf's when Jinho approached. "You came," the man said, his voice low and sharp. "Lowen, as I told you." "Yes," Jinho whispered. Da-da-da-da-da. His breath hung in the air like smoke. The man pulled something from his coat pocket and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a small, precious pouch. Even in the dim light, Jinho saw the faint sparkle of sugar crystals. It was as if the stars had fallen into the man's hand. Jinho's chest tightened. That little pouch could save Haijin. "You want this?" The traitor's tone was mocking, like he already knew the answer. "Yes," Jinho said, his voice breaking. "Then you work, and you keep your mouth shut." The man stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Jinho. "Tomorrow morning, you'll deliver this packet to a woman in the market. You'll recognize her blue scarf, missing tooth. Don't open it, don't sniff it, don't ask questions. Just put it in her hands. Then come back here. Do it well, and maybe I'll give you sugar. Ginho's stomach turned. He didn't know what was inside, but he knew it wasn't something allowed. If the Korean soldiers caught him, the thought alone froze his blood. I could get killed, Jinho whispered. The man crouched, grabbing Jinho's chin with a rough hand. Boy, everything in this land can get you killed. Starving, speaking, even breathing too loud. You want your sister to live? Then you'll take the risk. Ginho nodded, too scared to do anything else. The man shoved the small packet into his coat pocket and vanished into the night as if he had never been there. The next morning, the market was alive with hushed desperation. Women clutched their rations, children scurried for scraps, and Korean soldiers watched with eyes like knives. Jinho's heart hammered as he searched for the woman. Their blue scarf, missing tooth, just as the man described. She stood by a stall, pretending to sell dried fish. Ginho swallowed hard and walked over, every step feeling like he was dragging a mountain. He slipped the packet into her hand without a word. For a moment, she met his eyes, cold, empty, and yet filled with something he couldn't name. She turned and disappeared into the crowd. It was done. But then, boy, you there? Soldier's voice cut through the air. Jinho froze, his blood turning to ice. The soldier stepped closer, suspicion etched across his face. What's in your pocket? Jinho's hand shot to his coat instinctively, but the pocket was empty. He had already delivered it. The soldier's eyes narrowed anyway. I was just looking for food, comrade, Jinho stammered, lowering his head. The soldier studied him, silent for too long. Then, with a grunt, he pushed Jinho aside. Get out of here, rat. Don't let me see you again.
I ought.
Ginho stumbled away, his legs barely carrying him. The fear lingered, burning in his chest like fire. That night, he returned to the river. The scar-faced trader was waiting, his smile like a knife. You did it, the man said. Good, you're useful. He tossed the small pouch of sugar into Jinho's hands. Jinho clutched it like it was life itself. But before he could leave, the man grabbed his shoulder. This isn't the end, boy. You owe me now. And one day, when I need you again, you'd better come. Jinho nodded quickly, but inside, dread coiled in his stomach. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. Still, when he returned home and fed Hijin a spoonful of the sugar water, and saw her eyes flutter open with the faintest strength, he knew he would do it again. For her, he would do anything. The sweetness lingered on Hijin's lips like a memory of a life she had never known. For one brief evening, the tiny room filled with something close to hope. Jinho watched her drift into a calmer sleep, her breathing less shallow, her face less pale. The moment the sugar had been a miracle. But by dawn the illusion cracked. Hijin's cough returned, harsher, rattling her thin chest. Their mother, sitting beside her, whispered prayers Jinho had never heard before. Before desperate words that sounded like they came from someone on the edge of surrender. The truth was clear. A single pouch of sugar was not salvation. Hunger was stronger. Hunger was endless. The week stretched like a nightmare. The family's rations were nothing but a handful of cornmeal, barely enough to keep bones upright. Jinho tried to chew slowly, pretending to feel full, but his belly screamed in protest. His body felt weak, and yet he forced himself to rise before dawn to search for scraps roots in the frozen ground. Rats that scurried in the shadows. He gave most of what he found to Hijin. Watching her eat, seeing her small hands cup each bite as though it were gold, kept him alive. But their mother noticed his gaunt face, his hollowed cheeks. You can't keep giving everything away, she whispered one night as the wind howled against the cracks in their home. I can, Jinho replied, his voice steady even as his body trembled. She's the one who matters. His mother's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing more. At the market, the air reeked of desperation. People traded whatever they could, cloth scraps, rusty pots, even the buttons off coats. Jinho moved through the crowd like a shadow, his eyes searching for the scar-faced trader. He found him near the back, speaking quietly with another man. When the trader saw Jinho, a grin spread across his face. Back already, I knew you'd return. Hunger always brings them back. Jinho lowered his head. I need more sugar, please. My sister, sugar doesn't come cheap, boy. The man leaned closer, his voice sharp. You'll take another job, riskier this time. Do it right, and you'll have more sugar than you can imagine. Ginho's stomach tightened. What do I have to do? The trader's smile widened. Deliver this package across the river tonight. The word sank into Ginho like a blade. The river meant Korean soldiers. The river meant death. I can't, Ginho whispered. They'd catch me. The man's hand clamped down on his shoulder, fingers digging into bone. Then your sister dies. Choose, boy. That night Ginho stood at the river's edge. The ice groaned beneath his feet, the black water shifting below like a hungry mouth. In his coat, the package weighed heavy, like a stone dragging him into darkness. Every shadow felt like a Korean soldier's gaze. Every sound echoed like footsteps of death. He took a step forward. The ice cracked but held. He took another. His breath came in sharp bursts, fogging the air. Halfway across, a shout pierced the silence. Stop! Who goes there? A Korean soldier's voice. Ginho froze. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would shatter the ice itself. He crouched low, praying the shadows would hide him. For a moment, only silence followed, then footsteps crunched on the bank, fading into the distance. And Ho didn't move until his legs screamed with pain. Finally, with a surge of desperate courage, he hurried across and delivered the package to a waiting figure on the other side. The man took it without a word, his face hidden in the dark. When Ginho returned, the trader's grin was waiting for him. Good boy, the man said, tossing him 2 pouches of sugar this time. See, fear keeps you alive, and now you're mine. Ginho clutched the sugar as if it were life itself, but dread gnawed at him. He had crossed the river, and in doing so, crossed something inside himself. When he gave Hejin the sweet water that night, her smile was weak, but real. Puh, she whispered, her voice fragile, but filled with trust. You're my hero. The words stabbed at him. He wasn't a hero. He was a boy sinking deeper into shadows, chained by hunger and fear. But for her, he would keep sinking. The market buzzed with whispers, but every voice seemed sharpened by suspicion. Ginho had learned that hunger wasn't the only danger in North Korea's, were everywhere. Neighbors watched neighbors, children repeated their parents' words to teachers. And Korean soldiers lingered at every corner, rifles slung casually over their shoulders, as if death were just another chore. After his river crossing, Ginho felt the weight of those eyes more than ever. Each time he walked through the village, he wondered who knew, who suspected. Did the traitor keep his secret safe? Or had he already whispered Jinho's name to the guards? One afternoon, as Ginho passed through the square, he felt a sudden grip on his arm. The Korean soldiers, tall and stern, pulled him aside. The man's gaze was sharp, like he could peel away layers of lies just by staring. You were seen near the river last night, the Korean soldiers said. Why? Jinho's chest tightened. His mind raced. If he hesitated, if he faltered, he was finished. I was looking for wood, comrade, he stammered. My family needs to stay warm. The Korean soldiers' silence stretched long enough for fear to dig claws into Jinho's ribs. Finally, the man shoved him back. Be careful where you wander, boy. One wrong step, and the river will swallow you. Ginho bowed quickly and hurried away, his legs trembling. At home, their mother noticed his pale face. What happened? She whispered. Nothing, Ginho lied. But the truth was already a shadow between them. He couldn't burden her with the danger he carried, not when Hijen's weak smile was the only thing keeping her alive. That night, as the family huddled in the dark, Ginho heard footsteps outside. He froze, listening. A knock came, slow and deliberate. His mother opened the door to find their neighbor, Mrs. Park, standing there. Her eyes flicked to Ginho, then back to his mother. Be careful, she said softly. The Korean soldiers have been asking questions. They say smugglers are moving goods through the river, if they even suspect you. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. After she left, silence filled the room like a heavy fog. The days that followed stretched Jinho's nerves to the breaking point. At school, teachers lectured about loyalty to the leader, their voices filled with rehearsed passion. Students chanted slogans until their throats ached. But beneath the surface, Ginho felt the hunger in every child, the hollow stares, the way their ribs pressed against their uniforms. One day a classmate whispered to him, I saw you at the market. Talking to that man. Jinho's blood turned cold. "You're mistaken," he said quickly. The boy only shrugged, but his smile was thin and sharp. That night, Jinho lay awake, wondering if his classmate would repeat those words to someone else. He realized then that survival was not just about foodite, was about silence, about lies. When he next saw the scar-faced traitor, Jinho's anger boiled. "You're putting me in danger," he hissed. The traitor chuckled, unbothered. "Danger is the price of life, boy. Do you think anyone survives here without risk? Sugar, rice, medicine, it all comes from risk. The Korean soldiers eat well while you starve. Do you think they care if your sister dies?" Jinho clenched his fists. The man was right, but the truth didn't make it easier to swallow. You want your sister to live? Then keep your mouth shut. Keep working. The regime is always watching, but they can't watch everything. The words were meant to comfort, but to Jinho, they sounded like a death sentence. That night, Haijin coughed so hard she vomited. Jinho held her, panic clawing at his throat. He could feel her bones through her skin, her body as fragile as paper. "Hey, don't leave me," she whispered. "I won't," he said, though part of him wondered if he was lying. The truth was, he was fighting a war he could not win against hunger, against fear, against the eyes that followed him everywhere. In that moment, Jinho made a silent vow. He would not be broken, not yet. If the regime wanted to crush him, they would have to try harder, because for Haijin, he would risk everything. Even if it meant becoming invisible in a land where everyone was always being watched. The winter nights of North Korea in their village were colder than the silence inside their home. The stove had burned out long ago, and the walls groaned with the wind. Hujin's breath came in shallow puffs, as if each one was an effort, and every cough cut through Jinho like a blade. He knew the sugar was not enough. Her body needed more risks, medicine, something to give her a chance. But food was rationed so tightly that even government workers starved. The only people who ate were Korean soldiers and the men who worked for the regime. So one evening, Jinho returned to the market. The stalls were nearly empty, but the shadows between them were alive with quiet deals and hidden hands. He found the scar-faced trader crouched near a broken cart, his eyes glinting with greed. "You again?" the man smirked. "What do you want this time?" Jinho said. His voice trembled, but he steadied it. "Medicine if you have any." "My sister," he trailed off. He didn't need to explain further. The trader's expression shifted just slightly. "Medicine costs more than sugar, boy. And rice. Rice is worth more than gold." "I'll do anything," Jinho blurted out, his fists clenching. "Just give me what she needs." The trader leaned closer, his breath thick with tobacco. "There is a way. But it will break you if you're not careful." Jinho swallowed hard. "Tell me." "There's a military storage house not far from the barracks. They keep food there, sometimes medicine. If you can slip inside, bring me what I ask for, and I'll give you what your sister needs. But if you're caught," the man dragged a finger across his throat. Jinho froze. Did breaking into a military storehouse was suicide? Even being caught near one could mean execution. Yet Hajin's face flashed in his mind, her thin arms clinging to him like he was the only thing tethering her to life. "I'll do it," he whispered. That night he crept toward the edge of the village. The moon was a thin blade in the sky, barely giving light. Every step made the snow crunch like thunder beneath his feet. His heart pounded so loudly he feared the Korean soldiers could hear it echoing across the frozen fields. The storage house loomed ahead, a squat building surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. 2 guards stood by the entrance, rifles gleaming under lantern light. Jinho hid in the shadow of a tree, his breath fogging in the bitter cold. He waited. Minutes dragged into hours. His fingers went numb. Finally, one guard wandered off to smoke, leaving the other drowsy and distracted. Jinho seized the moment, slipping through a hole in the wire. Inside, the building smelled of dust and grain. His eyes widened at the sight of sacks piled high with rice, shelves stacked with cans of food, bottles of medicine glinting faintly. It was a cruel mockery while families starved. Korean soldiers had enough to last for months. He stuffed what little he could into a cloth bag race. 2 bottles, a handful of canned goods. His hands shook, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that if he was caught, it would be the end. As he slipped back out, a sound froze him in place a cough. low and rough. The drowsy guard had turned, his eyes narrowing. Ginho ducked behind a barrel, heart hammering. "Who's there?" the guard barked, stepping closer. Ginho bit his lips so hard it bled. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The Korean soldier's boots crunched the snow, closer, closer until a distant shout called him back. Relief surged through Ginho like fire. He waited until the guard disappeared, then bolted into the night, the bag of stolen life pressed to his chest. When he finally staggered home, his mother gasped at the sight of the food. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched his face. "Jinho, what have you done?" she whispered, half in terror, half in awe. "What I had to," he said. His voice was raw, but steady. "Hey." He sat by Heejin's side, spooning a little rice into her trembling hands. Her eyes lit up, a spark of hope he hadn't seen in months. For a moment, just a moment, it felt worth it. But even as she swallowed, Jinho knew the truth. The bargain he had made was not with the traitor, but with the shadows themselves. And in North Korea, shadows had teeth. The morning after Jinho brought home the stolen food, the house felt alive for the first time in months. The smell of boiled rice filled the small room, rising like a miracle. His mother wept quietly as she stirred, whispering prayers under her breath. Hygiene sat propped against the wall, color returning faintly to her cheeks as she swallowed each bite with trembling hands. For a brief moment, it felt like victory. Jinho allowed himself to breathe. He had done it. He had saved her. But victories in North Korea never lasted long. By midday, the sound of boots echoed through the village, loud voices, the bark of Korean soldiers questioning, the crash of doors being kicked open. Rumors spread like wildfire someone had broken into a military storage house. Supplies were missing. The regime was furious. Jinho's chest tightened. He forced himself to remain calm, helping his mother hide the remaining food in the hollow floorboards, but every knock on the door made his heart stop. That evening, 2 Korean soldiers entered their home without asking. Their uniforms reeked of sweat and tobacco, their rifles slung casually as if they were an extension of their arms. "Show us your storeroom," one barked. His eyes swept over the cracked walls, the thin blankets, the single cooking pot steaming with rice. The second soldier stepped forward, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. He lifted the pot lid and sneered. "And where did you get this? Families like yours don't eat rice, only dogs like you." Jinho's mother bowed deeply, her voice shaking. "A neighbor shared it with us. My daughter is ill." "Please," the soldier struck her across the face. She crumpled to the floor with a muffled cry. Jinho's fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. His blood boiled, but he forced himself still. If he moved, if he spoke, if he looked at them wrong, they would know. The Korean soldiers searched the house, tearing apart mats, overturning jars, ripping through clothes. When they found nothing, their anger only grew. "You're lying," the first one snarled, grabbing Jinho by the collar. His breath stank of alcohol. "Tell me where you got it." Jinho's heart pounded so loudly he thought it would give him away. He lowered his gaze, forcing the words through trembling lips. "The neighbor, she gave it to us. My sister is dying." The soldier's grip tightened. For a long, terrifying moment, Jinho thought he would be dragged outside, beaten, or worse. Then the man shoved him to the ground. "If I find out you're lying," he spat, "you'll beg for death." They left as suddenly as they came, slamming the door behind them. The silence they left was suffocating. That night, Jinho's mother sat in the corner, a bruise blooming across her cheek. She looked at him with fear in her eyes. "Jinho," she whispered, "what have you done?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could do was sit beside Hyjin, feeding her small spoonfuls of rice, while his own stomach clawed with hunger. Her faint smile gave him strength, but it also crushed him, because he knew the Korean soldiers would be back. In the days that followed, the village became a cage. Korean soldiers patrolled the streets, knocking on doors, interrogating families. The air was thick with suspicion. Neighbors eyed one another like enemies. Someone, somewhere, would be forced to confess or to betray. And in the shadows of the market, the scar-faced trader appeared again. He leaned against a wall, watching Jinho approach with wary eyes. "You did well," the man said quietly. "But now you've drawn attention. We'll not stop searching until they have someone to punish." What should I do? Jinho whispered, panic creeping into his voice. The trader smirked, his teeth yellow in the dim light. You survive. That's all you can do. But survival comes with a price. Always. That night, as Jinho lay awake listening to his sister's shallow breathing, he realized the truth. His defiance had fed her, but it had also painted a target on his back. Every step outside, every look from a soldier, every whisper from a neighbor could be the end of him. Yet when he looked at Hajin's fragile form curled under a thin blanket, he knew one thing with certainty. He would pay any price, even if it meant his life. The North Korean village grew quieter after the Korean soldiers' raid, but it wasn't the calm of peace, it was the silence of fear. Doors closed earlier, voices hushed in the market, and children no longer played in the dirt streets. Everyone knew the Korean soldiers were watching. Everyone knew someone would be punished soon. Jinho felt the eyes on him. When he walked past neighbors, conversations stopped. Mothers pulled their children closer. An old man spat in the dust when Jinho's shadow passed by. It was as if they could smell his guilt, even though no one had proof. At home, the tension was worse. His mother avoided his eyes, her hands trembling as she sewed patches into his worn coat. She had asked again and again where the rice had come from, but Jinho had stayed silent. The truth would only break her. But silence was also dangerous. In North Korea, secrets festered like wounds and they always drew the attention of those desperate to save themselves. One evening, while returning from the riverbank, Jinho overheard two women whispering outside a shack. They say it was stolen from the army. Whoever did it has doomed us all. I heard it was the widow's boy, Jinho. He had rice when no one else did. Jinho froze in the shadows, his blood running cold. His name was already spreading like a curse. He stumbled back home, breath ragged, and found his mother praying quietly, her lips moving without sound. Hyjin stirred weakly, her eyes barely opening. She was still alive, still clinging on, but thinner than ever. Jinho knelt beside her, holding her fragile hand. Don't worry, he whispered, forcing a smile. I'll keep you safe. But in his chest, dread knotted him. The next day, a neighbor boy named Sungmin slipped into his path. They'd once been friends, sharing stolen apples from the orchards in better days. Sungmin's eyes now carried something different, something sharp. My father says the Korean soldiers will pay rewards for information, Sungmin muttered. Better to point the finger before someone else does. Jinho stiffened. His voice came out low. And would you do that to me? To my family? Sungmin shrugged. But the look in his eyes told Jinho everything. Hunger made enemies out of friends. Fear made traitors out of neighbors. That night, the knock came again. 3 hard bangs on the wooden door. His mother gasped, clutching Hyjin to her chest. Jinho's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to open the door. It wasn't Korean soldiers. It was the scar-faced traitor. You've been noticed, the man said, stepping inside without asking. Someone is whispering your name to the Korean soldiers. It won't be long before they drag you away. Jinho's throat went dry. What do I do? The traitor's eyes glinted in the dim light. There are always choices. You can run, you can fight. Or he leaned closer. You can buy silence. Sugar, rice, cigarettes. They keep mouths closed. For a while. Jinho looked around the shack, at the emptiness of their home, at his mother's frightened eyes, at Hyjin's sunken face. They had nothing left to trade, nothing but him. Later that night, lying awake on the floor beside his sister, Jinho realized something even more terrifying than hunger. The regime didn't need to kill him. His own people would. Whispers had more power than bullets here. A single word could destroy everything. And sooner or later, someone would trade his life for their survival. The air was sharp with winter's teeth, the kind that split skin open with every gust. The Tumen River stretched ahead of Jinho like a silver serpent, frozen in some places, cracked in others. On the far side lay China land whispered about in broken promises, a place where food was not rationed and Korean soldiers did not hunt their own people. Jinho stood at the bank with his breath clouding before him, his hands shaking. His mother clutched Hyjin, who was wrapped in the thinnest quilt they owned. Her little lips were pale, her body too light in his arms. You can't, his mother whispered, her voice breaking. The river swallows, boys, braver than you. The Korean soldiers shoot without warning. Jinho's jaw tightened. If I don't, She dies here. We all do. It wasn't courage that pushed him toward the river. It was desperation, the raw edge of a life with no other roads left. They traveled at night through the shadows of skeletal trees. Every crunch of snow underfoot sounded like thunder in Jinho's ears. His mother kept glancing back, fearful of footsteps following them. At the river's edge, they crouched low, watching the dark horizon. The border guard tower loomed like a predator, its spotlight sweeping over the ice in slow arcs. Jinho waited, counting the rhythm of the beam, timing the seconds when shadows returned. His mother's hand gripped his arm so tightly it hurt. "If we get caught, I know," Jinho interrupted. He had seen it before. Bodies dragged back to camp, mothers wailing, children left behind. Didn't he tell her what else he knew, that death might even be a mercy compared to being caught alive? He stepped onto the ice first, testing it with the ball of his foot. The surface cracked faintly, but it held. He motioned for his mother to follow, lifting Haijin carefully into his arms. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breath faint as mist. Each step was agony. The ice shifted and groaned as if the river itself wanted to pull them under. The wind carried distant voices, Korean soldiers laughing near a fire, their rifles glinting faintly under the moonlight. Halfway across, a sound cut through the silence, a flare snapping open in the sky, flooding the river with cruel white light. "Run," Jinho hissed. They stumbled forward, the ice screeching beneath them. His mother clutched his sleeve, dragging herself over the slick surface. Behind them, shouts erupted, harsh voices, boots pounding on frozen ground. The spotlight swung over them, pinning their shadows to the river like prey caught in a trap. A soldier's command rang out, followed by the mechanical click of rifles being raised. Jinho's heart hammered so loud he thought the Korean soldiers could hear it. He clutched Haijin tighter, whispering into her hair, "Just a little more, just a little more." The far bank was close now, branches, earth, a chance at life. But every step made the rifles behind them louder. His mother slipped, her hands clawing at the ice, dragging herself up with a sob. "Go," she cried. "Take her and go." Jinho shook his head violently. "No, we all go together." The first shot cracked across the night sky, echoing like thunder. The bullet struck the ice near his feet, sending shards flying. And then another shot, this time closer. Jinho stumbled forward, vision blurred, lungs on fire. The river was no longer ice and water, it was judgment, and they were running out of time. Behind him, the Korean soldiers shouted again, their voices carrying one merciless truth. There would be no second chances. The gunfire split the night like lightning. Jinho's body jolted as a bullet tore past him, close enough to sting his cheek with shards of ice. Ijin whimpered weakly in his arms, too frail even to cry. His mother stumbled again, her hands scraped raw from the frozen surface, blood smearing the ice behind them. "Keep moving," Jinho urged, his throat raw. His breath was fire, his legs trembling. But the far bank was only steps away now. Freedom within reach. Another crack, another bullet. This time his mother cried out, her body crumpling onto the ice. Jinho spun around in horror. A dark stain spread across her side, blooming red against the white. She reached for him with trembling fingers, her eyes wide with both pain and love. "Take her," she gasped, nodding toward Haijin. "Don't stop, Jinho. Promise me." Tears blurred his vision.
Ow.
"I won't leave you. You must," she whispered. Her voice was breaking now, but her gaze was steady. "A mother dies for her children. Go." The Korean soldiers shouted again, closer now, their boots hammering the riverbank. The spotlight pinned him, freezing him in a pool of white. Jinho clutched Haijin tighter, torn in half. His mother lay bleeding, her strength slipping away with every breath. He wanted to stay, to drag her, to defy fate itself, but the sound of rifles being reloaded shattered his hesitation. He staggered forward. Every step was agony, his heart tearing apart, his body screaming under the weight of his sister. His mother's final cry echoed behind him, words broken by the wind. Live. For her, then the world exploded. A rifle fired, sharp and merciless. Jinho stumbled as pain ripped through his chest. He dropped to one knee, clutching Haijin desperately. Blood spread across his shirt, hot against the freezing air. The river tilted around him. His breath came ragged, shallow. But when he looked down at his sister, her tiny face pale and motionless, he forced himself back up. "Not yet," he whispered. "Not until you're safe." He staggered again, dragging himself across the last stretch of ice. The trees of the far shore seemed to lean toward him, close enough to touch, promising safety he might never taste. But the Korean soldiers weren't finished. Another shot cracked. Jinho felt the impact slam through him like a hammer. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the ice. Haijin rolled in his arms, her small body too still, her lips faintly blue. His trembling hand brushed her cheek. His tears froze before they could fall. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I tried." The last thing he saw was the river above him, endless and white. It's in the faint outline of the Chinese shore, just beyond reach. At dawn, the Korean soldiers dragged his body back to the North Korean bank. His mother's form was already still, eyes closed as if in sleep. Beside her, Jinho's arms were still curled protectively around Haijin, as though even in death he refused to let her go. The village would never hear their story. The river swallowed their hope. The regime erased their names. But somewhere, in the silence of that frozen landscape, their final act of defiance remained. A boy who risked everything for his starving sister's soul.